The one comment I do always get, especially if they found me through Fables, is like, I was surprised how good it is. I was surprised that at least it wasn't super cringy and horrible. Hey guys, what's up? Pretty low effort video today on my part. I really just wanted to talk about my creative projects that I've had going on my whole life, specifically novels, books, writing projects. Whenever I release something, whether it be, an album or a single or a novel or a short story or whatever, I really just like put it in one place and I post it really once or twice, and then I just kind of let it go. And that's because I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of stuff. I have a lot of acquaintances in the local music scene, and all you hear from them a lot of the time is like, check out my new EP, hey, I'm playing this show on such and such date, and you are just sort of assaulted with like their stuff, and that can be a turnoff. However, if you don't assault people with sort of what you are doing, then no one's ever going to look at it, and so it's kind of it's tough to decide how much you're going to bug everyone in your life, because you want people to consume your content, your creations, but you don't want to come off as that guy, right? And again, I hesitate a lot, but here I am. This is a video where I assault you in the kindest way possible with my projects. So I decided to do this because Max and I streamed on Fables a week or so ago, and I briefly mentioned my main book that I've written because I had someone who is a Fables viewer recently buy and read my book, and they left me a really, really nice note talking about it, and that kind of reminded me of it. And I found my copy of it and I started flipping through it, and I was kind of remembering like, yeah, this is good. It's interesting, if any of you guys have ever created anything, you probably know exactly what I'm about to say here, or understand and have felt it on your own, where you can't really, the only way you can possibly judge something, a creation of your own, through the eyes of a viewer is with a tremendous amount of time away from it. So like if you've just written a song or written a book, you can't possibly analyze it in the way that anyone else would, because your mind is so on it and has been so consumed by it from your perspective. And so it takes like a year or two or three completely away from it to the point where you've forgotten about large portions of it, and it's only at that point where you can kind of sit down and be like, oh hey, this was pretty good, or hey, this was not so good. And it's been a long time since I had read or thought about Amazon High here, and it's pretty good. I think this is my best work. It is a full-length book, but I think it's my most like user-friendly and easily digestible book I have out there. And I mentioned it on the stream. And what was really cool is that then a day or two later, I guess Wes Johnson must have watched the stream, because he tweeted that he bought the book. And so I was like 80% excited and 20% scared because someone whose opinion and just someone whose status I'm like in awe of reading my book is like, oh man, I really hope he likes it. But again, I was awestruck that he would buy it. That's so cool. So I've been writing for a long time, and only ever as an amateur writer, but I think a lot of you will vibe with what I'm about to say as well. Here, when I was a really little kid, anytime I'd like play with toys or Legos or whatever, there would always be a pretty thick and usually dramatic plot and specific characters and things. And I'd be like playing with action figures and stuff, but then I'd go like draw characters and the likeness of those action figures and sort of expand on a story in my mind from there. And that was when I was really little. And I remember in first grade we had an assignment to a little project to write and draw a picture book. And instead of just doing one, which is the assignment, I think I did like three. I did one that was just like a copy of the Ocarina of Time, which we also mentioned on the stream, because at that age I watched Max play that game all the time. And so it was in my head, and I just sort of reiterated it with this this assignment in terms of this assignment via this picture book, and I drew these terrible pictures of Link, and I just sort of summarized what happened in the game. And then there was the second one was about me and my dad going to Flagstaff, which is northern Arizona, on a day when it snowed, and I think it was either my first or one of my first times seeing snow. I think it was my first time seeing snow, but I didn't see snow fall until later. But that was one of the books. And then the other book was, which became sort of a running theme for me, the third one was sort of like a sci-fi Star Wars ripoff. And then I remember in fourth grade, we had another English assignment. It was a long form assignment to write a novel. And again, I chose sort of just a straight up Star Wars ripoff type thing I called The Future. And they were essentially on a planet that was exactly like Coruscant, and instead of lightsabers, they just had like these fully electric blades they could sort of conjure that were almost like the weapon I think Necrid uses in Soul Calibur. And I don't really remember what happened, but I remember getting these composition notebooks, and I would like draw a cover. I'd just like take a piece of printer paper and I'd draw like the book cover in pencil or pen and markers or whatever, and I'd tape it to the front of that composition notebook, and I ended up making like 5 or 6 installments of The Future in those composition notebooks. I still have them somewhere. Then in middle school, I wrote a short story, and then in high school, I wrote a full-length sort of it wasn't sci-fi in the same vein of Star Wars. It took place on Earth, and then it was almost more like Elysium. It was kind of like Elysium, but it was before Elysium was a thing. And then I wrote another sort of novella-length thing, and I wrote a lot of stuff that I never finished, and half-baked stuff early into college. When I was 20, 21, 22, I started writing, and I got sort of halfway through another sort of fantasy-type thing called Within Reach, and that's still on my Wattpad page. It's unfinished. I don't think I'd ever finish it, but I got so far, and there was a lot of good content in there. However, I think I really hit my stride shortly, like halfway through college and out of college. So the first full-length thing I wrote that I'm proud of and that is on Amazon, and I'll link everything below, is called Amazon High. So this is the perfect marriage of two of my favorite things. One of them being Rockstar's Bully. If you guys ever played the game Bully, it's definitely inspired by that. And it's also halfway inspired by one of my favorite TV shows ever. I hold it up there with like Seinfeld and Breaking Bad, Freaks and Geeks, which is an incredible show. So I tried to sort of get the heart and the humor of Freaks and Geeks, and then the adventurous but also sort of, raunchy tone of Bully. And then I stick sort of a Freaky Friday-esque premise at the center of it. And I think the best way to sort of, argue that you guys should read my stuff is to just show you or tell you what other people have said. So I have 3 books for sale on Amazon, and these books are also available on Wattpad if you don't want to buy them. I think I made them pretty cheap on Amazon, but if you'd rather just read them, that's totally cool. They're all on Wattpad, and again, that'll be all linked below. So first I'll read the Amazon Marketplace reviews for Amazon High from most recent to oldest. And this most recent one is that Lefebvre's fan who sort of reached out to me and got me to sort of take a look at it once again. So he said, really great read. I wasn't expecting it to emotionally hit me as much as it did. Characters were well written, and the main character had a great emotional and intellectual arc that felt extremely relatable. All the main characters' mistakes felt like stuff I would have done, given the circumstances, and some interesting psychology going on as a bonus. Plus, from the perspective of someone who doesn't conform to gender norms and stereotypes and typically identifies as non-binary, the gender themes of the book felt very true to experiences, as the main character tries to figure out how they feel about their own gender and how to navigate the way they feel about others as well. In short, I couldn't recommend it more. That's awesome. Thank you so much. The next review reads, interesting characters, playful and engaging, waiting impatiently for season 2. I'm bad at reviews, but this book is good. I do have like one chapter of a second installment written, but I have to be in the right place to really write it, and I'll talk about that in a minute here. But moving on, awesome book with great writing and characters. The pace is perfect, fairly fast to keep you turning the pages, but not too fast. The dialogue is realistic and relevant. I cried and felt all sorts of emotions reading this book, which a book hasn't done for me in a long time. The story and characters makes you reflect on yourself and your own experiences, particularly in high school, which makes it much more than just a story. I also haven't been into reading since high school, but I finished this book within a few days and want to read more now. And there's sort of a joke review, but still nice. This book left me feeling especially delightful after reading it. I would often tell people to leave me alone while reading it, as I was so absorbed. I barely even found the time to get down to the Sky District as often as I would have liked. 10 out of 10. And then on Wattpad, on the same story, it's the same story, just free online instead of the physical copy. A reader, I really don't know who this person is, but a reader left a very, very kind comment. They said, "If you can excuse my self-indulgence, I'd like to leave a comment on this story. Firstly, I want to say I'm really enjoying it. I think the characterization is really great, and I appreciate how respectfully you seem to treat everything. I'm trans, and if I was less in denial about that when I was younger, this is exactly the kind of story I would have sought out and devoured. So reading it now almost feels like experiencing a part of my childhood I never really got to have, which seems, if not a direct mirror of the themes of this book, at the very least adjacent to its premise. And for that, I deeply and sincerely thank you." To go on a bit of a tangent, Amazon High has had me thinking over the past day or two, and in stories like this, as well as in the scenarios I'd sometimes imagine as a kid, that waking up as the other gender is always a shock, something to hide from everyone, something you maybe don't even notice at first. But it occurred to me that I've done that now. When I wake up, I am a girl now, but it's not a shock, and I don't have to hide it. And I've definitely been paying close, eager attention to all the changes as they've happened to me. In almost every way, how I imagine waking up as a girl would go has been wrong, and it's been a joy. I don't really know how to close off this comment, so I'll just say again, I'm really loving this book, as well as the accompanying music, and I'm ever keen to read more. And then that same user left a comment on a later chapter. She said, "This was so intense, man, got my heart pounding just reading this. You're a great writer." So yeah, two things that were kind of given away there. And if you guys have been following this page, my private YouTube page, or my personal YouTube page for a while now, you will have noticed that I sort of wrote a soundtrack to go along with this book. As a musician and as a composer, it just really helps me get into the vibe, the headspace, the world of the story to write an accompanying soundtrack, even though that doesn't necessarily make any sense. How would I implement that unless I made an audiobook, which maybe sometime in the future I will. The other thing is, yeah, so that sort of Freaky Friday-esque premise is, I'll just give it to you because it's revealed by the end of the first chapter there, and they kind of gave it away, which is fine. It's about a young man who's graduating high school, and as he's sort of partying with his friends, one poses the question, if you had to do it differently, what would you do? And this guy, Alex, is sort of pessimistic towards women. He had some bad experiences with women through high school, and so he says, I'd do it as a girl because it would probably be easier. And sort of through fate of we don't know what, I never explain it. In my headcanon, it seems like a Greek god type thing to do to someone, so that's sort of my headcanon, but I don't make it known in the story, and that is intentional. I don't like it when certain things are explained when they don't need to be. But so after he says that, he parties, he falls asleep. The next day he wakes up. That's exactly where he's at. It's his first day of his freshman year, and now he's a girl. And it's just sort of the trials and tribulations that come with that. And obviously the obvious moral, and there's a lot more to it than this, but the obvious moral is that it's not necessarily easier as a girl, right? Everything has its own trials and tribulations, but it's a lot more than that. And to be perfectly upfront, I didn't intentionally write this to be like a trans allegory or anything, but I think the fact that it was unintentional makes it almost better. I think when you set out to write something that you want someone to have a specific takeaway, sometimes it can go awry or be too in your face or whatever. And the amount of trans people and Fables fans that have come forward and said how like they really vibe with this book and it means a lot to them. Like it should have been obvious to me, but it wasn't. And I was like, it was a really sort of happy surprise. And thank you to all those people. And I'm so glad you took so much away from it. Now, on that note, I think one of the reasons this book was, I think, the best one I've written is on two counts for two reasons. One of them is because I wrote what I knew, and I wrote from a lot of personal experiences. The high school I imagined was my high school. A lot of the characters were friends I knew in high school, and so it helped me to envision it. I didn't really have to envision it because it was all real. It was all there. They were all real experiences. And going back to Freaks and Geeks, there was a great documentary about it I just watched last week. It's called Culture Shock. I think Culture Shock is like a series, and they did an episode on Freaks and Geeks. And they were interviewing the writers and directors and producers, and it was revealed that 90% of that show was made up of true stories from the writers and the producers and just people on set had in high school. And so they compiled all of those real tales and sort of put them into Freaks and Geeks. And there is a tremendous amount of magic and relatability when you take something that just straight up happened. That's definitely what happened in this book, because it's the only book that I've written that easily presents that sort of writing. Because all the other stuff I write, a lot of it's sci-fi and stuff, which you can definitely take personal real experiences and sort of mold them into a fantasy setting. Not saying you can't do that, but the fact that this story did just take place in what was essentially my high school with my friends, it was a lot easier to just inject my own experiences and feelings, and it was easier to write for these characters because they weren't characters, they were just real people, and all you really got to do is change the names around, and there you go. And the other thing that I think made it great was it's a little embarrassing to talk about, but I think it worked, and I know I'm not the only one who's done this, is I really dove hard into the main character. The main character's physically and part of her personality is based off of a friend of mine from high school, and the other part is just sort of made up. But what I did while writing this is I tried in some circumstances and in some ways to become the character. I changed the way I dressed a little bit. I wore my hair a little bit differently. Not in like an obnoxious, weird way, but I mean, this whole thing maybe seemed cringy to people anyway. But in a way, I tried to become the character, or what I thought the character should be, or I tried to act the way I thought the character would. And not because I thought that'd be like a good writing exercise or anything, but because I was so into it that I wanted to immerse myself in it, and that was just almost that there wasn't even a question about it. It wasn't a decision one day. I just woke up and I was like, okay, I'm going to behave like this character. It just sort of happened. It was a natural progression as I started to write it and as I started to get into it. My dad has always told me the story that Stephen Sondheim would walk around the streets of New York and pretend to be the characters from his musicals. And my dad said he even ran into him once, and he was acting really weirdly and erratically, and my dad asked if he was okay, and he got annoyed and walked away because he broke his immersion, essentially. So I'm not the only one who does it. I'm sure there's a lot of other people who do that, but that's the only time I did do that. I'm not running around, constantly pretending I'm some character from my book, but I was in such a tunnel vision, zoomed in headspace for this novel that just sort of happened. And I've never done that since, and I don't think I would or can anymore. It was at a time in my life where I did have a certain amount of free time, which helped. I'd go on long walks and I'd just daydream, and I'd write the soundtrack, and sometimes I'd write a scene and then I'd write a piece of music to go with it, and then sometimes vice versa, I'd write this music to sort of go with the overall story, and then one of the pieces I wrote would inspire a scene. And I'd go on these long walks and listen to the soundtrack, and again, I just sort of embodied the whole thing at that time in my life, and that definitely propelled it into being something special. So if you want to read one of my stories, this is probably, I would say this is the best one, I think. But if you're not into that kind of thing, then I have two now. There's supposed to be a third. Well, there is a third one, but I haven't published it yet. You can actually read all three of them on Wattpad, but I have on Amazon published 2 fantasy short stories. Now this one, completely different. This one I wrote after having taken a history of literature course, and we read a lot of ancient Greek plays like Ajax and Medea and stuff, and I was reading a lot of that stuff on my own, a lot of Aesop fables and stuff like that. So this is written to be like that. It spawned from a dream I had, and the dream is really just like the last chapter or last major event of the short story. And I got a Fables fan. She's not on the internet anymore, but I will credit her down below, and she's obviously credited on the Amazon Marketplace. I got her to make these beautiful, these gorgeous illustrations that really bring the whole thing to life, I think. But so, that being said, that I was reading a lot of ancient Greek plays and fables and stuff, I wrote it to sound intentionally like it was translated from another language, like it was translated from ancient Greek. So there's like, the dialogue is stilted in a way, and there's less contractions and stuff, and it's like less, it's not the way people would really talk, but I was in this headspace of ancient Greek plays in that writing style. So the writing is completely different from Amazon High. Amazon High, it's supposed to sound like, hey, these are real people more or less. This one, Amphora and Amalia, it should, I hope, if I did it correctly, it should sound like you're reading an ancient story that was translated from an ancient language. This one is more like a Hans Christian Andersen type story, or just like a cautionary kid's tale. And this one is also illustrated by the same person. The Little Finch. This one was also inspired by a dream. It's got a lot of cool illustrations and stuff in there. This one I think needs a little bit of tweaking here and there. You guys tell me what you think. I took a lot of time to like try and make it look pretty. I mean, obviously the artist more so than me, but I have all those embroidered letters and stuff in there. So you guys tell me what you think of this one. I think at the heart of it, it's a great story with a really definitive, well illustrated moral. But I think at some points it can be confusing. So let me know what you guys think of this one. I may go back and tweak it. This one, solid, not touching it. This one, solid, not touching it. Little Finch, maybe here and there, I would mess with it. But that would involve me having to like when you self-publish on Amazon, there's a lot of little tedious ropes you got to go through. So if I were to edit it, which would be something on its own, and then resubmit it to Amazon, that would take a little bit of time. And again, all this stuff is available to read on Wattpad for free, so check it out. The book I wanted to end with is not one that I can legally sell. It's on Wattpad though. It's a Star Wars book. It's called Forgotten Heroes, and this one doesn't need any tweaking either. I've written 2, not even sequels to Forgotten Heroes, but it's sort of a 3-pronged story that all spawned from the same premise. I wrote it as a COVID project. It was the summer of 2020. I had nothing to do. And I had just both read and listened to the Jedi Academy trilogy by Kevin J. Anderson. And I wanted to take my own stab at Star Wars. Now, I was living at that time in totally blissful ignorance of the Clone Wars TV show. I literally didn't even know who Ahsoka was. Like, if you said the word Ahsoka to me, I'd be like, what's that? So I'm saying this because I think there's a lot of similarities between her and a character that I have in the book, but none of that is intentional. And there's a lot of, there's one specific similarity. The premise is, spoilers, mild spoilers. The premise is Order 66 happens, 2 younglings escape. And I know everyone's doing this now. Everyone's doing Order 66, boom, boom, boom. But again, this is 2020, so it was a little before I think everyone else was doing it. But it's an exciting time, and it's a great catalyst for a story. So it starts, boom, like Order 66 is happening. The clone troopers just busted through the door. 2 kids escape, and they escape through, we're going into the Coruscant underworld, which is, I think, I just learned this a couple days ago, what Ahsoka does. So again, I didn't know that, but I think just from a writing perspective, it seems like an obvious thing to do. If you know that Coruscant has this seedy underworld where law is not necessarily present, then that just makes sense to be like the place to go if you're trying to escape. So these 2 kids, they go into the underworld. However, if you read this, you'll have to understand that I'm an EU guy. I'm an expanded universe fan. Again, I really don't follow any of the Disney stuff. From what I've seen of the Disney stuff, especially this newer show, Acolyte. And I'll say this both as a way to sort of egg on people into reading it, and both because I think it's true. I think this story, Star Wars Forgotten Heroes, this short story, you can read it in really a day if you have the day to read it, is better than anything that Disney has made. It's a bold claim, but fight me on it. It'll make you go want to read it and pick it apart and criticize it and tell me I'm wrong. Great, go read it. Except for Andor, I've heard is great. Andor, I've heard is incredible. I need to watch it. I just can't pull the trigger on it, but I know I need to sit down and watch it at some point. But anyway, yeah, no, legitimately, like everything I've seen from the Clone Wars show, and everything the scenes I've seen from Acolyte and all that other stuff, I think this is better, straight up. And I don't think that's saying much. I don't think that's saying like I'm the greatest writer in the world. I think more so that's saying Disney's really sort of butchered the IP they were given. But I do think the story has legs. And again, whenever I write anything, there's 2 things I want to make sure happen. I want it to have a point, which I think a lot of stuff actually doesn't these days. I want it to have either a moral, a purpose. I want it to stir something inside of you. I want it to ask a question. I want a specific point. I want a specific takeaway. I want you to be able to put the book down, or turn off the computer, and you walk away thinking about things, questioning things maybe, or feeling something. At the very least, that's why so much of my stuff is so short. The other thing is I don't want to waste your time. I want there to be a purpose. I want you to be able to take something away, and I don't want to waste a page. I get annoyed when I'm reading something and I feel like the author is wasting my time with just like stuff, junk. That's why the only full-length novel I have available to read or available to buy is Amazon High. And even in terms of books, it's a shorter book, but it doesn't waste your time. And that's why I was so happy when one of those folks who left a review said it's well-paced, because I really try to make sure everything is really well-paced. And again, the Star Wars short story that's on Wattpad, I think is pretty fast-paced. Everything is just like, we're going, things are happening, and then it's over. I don't want to waste your time. I know there are some readers who do read to sort of just, I don't know, for the same reason, we'd sit down and play a Bethesda game for 8 hours. They want to escape. I can't read with that same headspace in mind. I need to be actively like thinking and gaining something from it. There is an element of escapism. I have these fantasy worlds and these fun stories. There's always an element of escapism in reading and writing, but I don't want it to waste my time. My favorite authors when I was younger were Hemingway and Oscar Wilde and Malcolm Gladwell. He didn't even write fiction; that was just essays and stuff. But those guys, when they wrote, it was so packed, it was so dense with good, productive content that you kept turning the pages. And then, in English class, we'd read like some long-winded old British writer, and he'd be describing a tree for 5 pages, and I'd go to bed. So I try really hard not to waste your time, and I make sure there is a clear, concise purpose for the book. So check these ones out. Again, if you can't afford any of it, or you'd rather not buy because you don't know if it's good or not, then go to Wattpad and peruse. That's all free. I have some unfinished stuff on there, but again, what is finished and what I do suggest you read are Amazon High, Amphora Animalia, The Little Finch. I have the 3rd short fable on there. It's called The Artless King. I haven't touched that one or read that one, or I really forgot a lot about that one. So if you want to read that one, you can tell me what you think of it, because I don't remember much of it. And then Forgotten Heroes. And it's the one, I'll link it down below specifically, but it's the one with Darth Vader looking at Padme's coffin. And it's a beautiful painting. I'll also link the artist of that painting down below, because that painting itself sort of inspired a large portion of the book for me, of the short story rather. Yeah, and I will say, like, I know a lot of YouTubers, I feel like, dabble in stuff that they know nothing about. Like, I know a lot of YouTubers become big, and then they think they can just like become a musical artist, and it's always really well produced because they have the money to do it. But like the heart of it, the soul of it, and usually their voice, if they sing on it, it's not that great. They think they can just do it. And I remember, I think it's Onision was a writer as well, and someone like there's a whole video you can watch that I watched like half of years ago, where someone's just like ripping all of his, like, I guess they're awful books, awful fiction that Onision wrote. But the one comment I always get, maybe people are just being polite, but the one comment I do always get, especially if they found me through Lefebvre's, is like, I was surprised how good it is. I was surprised that at least it wasn't super cringy and horrible. So check it out. Check out one. Give it just a chapter, and if you don't like it, then forget it. But I do enjoy it. I haven't done it in a while. I haven't really sat down and written something in a while. I've dabbled here and there. I need to get back into it. It does take a lot of time. It takes a certain significant amount of free time to sort of mull over worlds and ideas, and get in the zone of the world that you're writing in. And unfortunately, I don't have that much time these days to really do that. Like, I had a tremendous amount of time to do it with Amazon High, and that's why I think it is my best work. But I hope to get back into it. But until then, why don't you drop a comment on this video if you go out and read just, a chapter, a paragraph of my stuff. Tell me what you think about it in the comments here. We can talk about it. If you think it stunk, if you think Forgotten Heroes is way worse than any of the Disney stuff, let me know. We can talk about it. Yeah, thank you guys. Let me know what you think, and thank you for the time. Even if you read a paragraph and you hated it, thank you for taking that time out of your day to consider my writing, because I do love doing it, and I take a lot of pride in it. So it means the world to me when anyone consumes it. So thank you guys. Take care. I'll see you later.